The Korean mafia boss tried everything to calm his crying baby. Then a black mother shocked the cabin. The infant's screams tore through the business class like a knife through silk, desperate and unrelenting. Every passenger within earshot shifted uncomfortably, exchanging irritated glances, but nobody dared complain, not when they saw the man holding the child. Min Jun-yoon sat rigidly in his seat, his jaw clenched so tight it could shatter steel. The custom-tailored charcoal suit that normally made him look like he'd stepped off a Seoul runway now felt like a straitjacket. His normally cold, calculating eyes held something foreign, something that didn't belong in the face of South Korea's most feared crime lord. Panic. Raw, unfiltered panic. The baby, his son, Jang-woo, continued to wail, tiny fists flailing against Min-jun's chest. 3 months old, and already bearing the weight of a legacy he never asked for. 3 months since Kira had taken her last breath, bringing this child into the world. 3 months since Min Jun-yoon, the man who controlled Seoul's underground with an iron fist, had become something he never thought possible: helpless. "Sir." One of his bodyguards leaned in carefully, speaking in hushed Korean. "We could request an emergency landing." "No." Min Jun's voice was still wrapped in silk-covered steel. "We stay on schedule." But Jang-woo didn't care about schedules. He didn't care that his father owned half of Seoul's most profitable enterprises, legitimate and otherwise. That politicians crossed the street when they saw him coming. That entire families had vanished at his word. The infant only knew hunger, discomfort, and the absence of the warmth he'd known for 3 precious months before it was stolen away. Min Jun had tried everything. Bottles prepared by the nanny waiting at their Los Angeles destination. Pacifiers that the child spat out with surprising force. Rocking motions that felt awkward in arms more accustomed to signing contracts and occasionally breaking bones. Nothing worked. If stories like this move you, hit subscribe. We're here to tell the ones that shake your soul. Now, let's continue. 5 rows ahead, Shannon Jordan heard the desperate cries and felt her body respond before her mind caught up. Her breasts ached with sympathetic letdown, milk threatening to soak through the nursing pads she still wore despite the fact that there was no baby waiting for her at home anymore. She closed her eyes, forcing down the wave of grief that always came with that thought. 7 months. It had been 7 months since she'd held her own daughter, Zoe. 7 months since that tiny heart had simply stopped beating in the night. No explanation, no warning. Sudden infant death syndrome, the doctors had said, as if putting clinical words to the nightmare made it hurt any less. Shannon had been returning from a grief counseling retreat in Seoul, a last-ditch effort to put her shattered life back together. She was a neonatal nurse, or at least she had been. After losing Zoe, she couldn't bring herself to return to the NICU. Couldn't watch other people's babies thrive while hers lay cold in the ground. The crying intensified, and Shannon felt tears prick her own eyes. She knew that sound, the desperate, hungry wail of an infant who needed something primal, something only a mother could provide. Her hands trembled as she gripped the armrests. "Ma'am, are you all right?" The flight attendant paused beside her, concerned. Shannon looked up, then back toward where the crying originated. "That baby. He sounds... I'm a nurse. Maybe I can help." The attendant's expression shifted to something between relief and skepticism. "The passenger has been quite firm about not wanting assistance, but if you'd like to try, I suppose it couldn't hurt." Shannon unbuckled her seatbelt before she could second-guess herself, following the attendant down the aisle. With each step, her heart pounded harder. This was insane. She was still lactating. Her body hadn't gotten the memo that there was no longer a baby to feed. But she couldn't just offer to breastfeed a stranger's child, could she? Then she saw him. Min Jun-yoon sat like an emperor on a throne, even in distress. Sharp cheekbones, a strong jaw, eyes so dark they looked like polished obsidian, absorbing light rather than reflecting it. His black hair was perfectly styled despite the chaos, and he wore power like a second skin. Danger radiated off him in waves that made every survival instinct Shannon had screamed to turn around. But the baby in his arms looked so small, so helpless against that broad chest. The infant's face was red from crying, tiny features scrunched in absolute misery. "Sir," the flight attendant began nervously in English, "this passenger is a nurse. She wondered if she might—" Minjun's gaze snapped to Shannon, and she felt the impact like a physical blow. Those eyes could strip flesh from bone, could make grown men confess to sins they hadn't even committed. For a moment, Shannon forgot how to breathe. "A nurse," he repeated, his voice low and rough, wrapped in a Korean accent that made the English words sound almost musical. "Pediatric? Neonatal," Shannon heard herself say, though her voice sounded far away. I know that cry. He's hungry. I've tried the bottle." Frustration cracked through Minjun's controlled exterior. "He won't take it." Shannon's eyes moved from the man to the baby, and something in her chest cracked open. The infant's cries had taken on a desperate edge, the kind that spoke of real distress. She'd heard it too many times in the NICU, and her body responded before her brain could catch up. "Some babies won't take artificial nipples," she said softly, stepping closer despite every instinct telling her to run from this dangerous man. Especially if they were breastfed initially. Was his mother? Something shifted in Minjun's expression, a flash of such raw pain that Shannon caught her breath. "She died," he said flatly, 12 weeks ago, giving birth to him. The cabin seemed to go silent around them, though the baby still cried. Shannon's eyes burned with unshed tears, her grief recognizing his even as her nurse's training kicked in. "Then he's probably refusing the bottle because he's looking for something familiar," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Something he associates with comfort and safety." Their eyes locked, and Sarah saw the exact moment he understood what she was implying. His jaw tightened, and for a second she thought he might order her away. But then Jang-woo let out another desperate wail, and something in the untouchable Korean mafia boss crumbled. "Are you offering what I think you're offering?" His voice was dangerous, testing, as if he couldn't quite believe what he was hearing. Shannon swallowed hard. This was insane. This was beyond insane. But the baby was suffering, and her body was producing milk that had nowhere to go. And maybe, just maybe, she could help this tiny life even though she'd failed to save her own. "I'm still producing," she admitted, her cheeks flushing. "I lost my daughter 7 months ago. My body I haven't been able to stop it. If you'd allow me, I could try." The silence that followed was deafening. Every passenger in business class had gone quiet, sensing they were witnessing something profound, even if they couldn't quite understand what. Min Jun-yoon stared at this woman, this Black American woman who had just offered the most intimate gift one human could give another, and felt the ground shift beneath him. In his world, there were no gifts. Everything had a price. Every kindness hid a blade. But this woman's eyes held only compassion and a grief that mirrored his own. "The lavatory," he said abruptly, standing with fluid grace despite the child in his arms. "It's more private." Shannon's heart hammered as she followed him toward the business class restroom, acutely aware of the bodyguard who fell into step behind them. This was real. This was actually happening. The bathroom was small but luxurious by airplane standards. Minjun stood in the doorway, his large frame taking up most of the space, hesitation written across features that probably hadn't shown uncertainty in years. "I'll wait outside," he said finally, his voice rough. "Unless you need—" "I'll be fine," Shannon assured him, though her hands shook as she reached for the baby. "What's his name?" "Jang-woo." The word came out like a prayer and a curse. "After my father." Shannon took the infant carefully, cradling his small body against her chest. Jiang Wu's cries had diminished to hiccuping whimpers, as if he sensed something was about to change. She looked up at Minjun, at this dangerous, powerful man who had just entrusted her with his most precious possession, and saw vulnerability that took her breath away. "I'll take care of him," she promised. Minjun nodded once, sharp and controlled, then stepped back to let her close the door. The moment it clicked shut, Shannon felt the weight of what she was about to do settle over her like a blanket. Her hands moved on autopilot, unbuttoning her blouse with the efficiency of someone who had done this 1,000 times before. The nursing bra came next, and then she was positioning Jiang Wu at her breast, supporting his tiny head the way she'd supported so many infants in the NICU. For a moment, nothing happened. Jiang Wu whimpered, turning his face against her skin, searching. Then his instincts kicked in and he latched on, and Shannon felt the familiar pull and release as he began to nurse. Tears streamed down her face silently as she looked down at the baby in her arms. He wasn't Zoe. He would never be Zoe. But he was a child who needed comfort, who needed nourishment, who needed the one thing her body was still desperate to provide. "It's okay, little one," she whispered, stroking his dark hair. "It's okay." Outside the door, Minjun Yoon stood with his fists clenched at his sides, his bodyguard wisely maintaining distance. The silence that had replaced his son's cries was both a relief and a torment. He'd just handed Jiang Wu to a complete stranger. He who trusted no one, who verified the background of every person who came within 10 feet of his child, had just given his son to a woman whose last name he didn't even know. But something about her had reached through the armor he'd built around himself. Maybe it was the grief in her eyes that matched his own. Maybe it was the desperate courage it took to offer such an intimate kindness to a stranger. Or maybe it was simply that, for the first time in 12 weeks, someone had offered to help without wanting something in return. When the bathroom door opened 15 minutes later, Shannon emerged with Jiang Wu sleeping peacefully in her arms. The infant's face was relaxed, his tiny fist curled against her chest, completely at peace. Minjun looked at his son, truly peaceful for the first time since Kira's death, and felt something shift in his chest. Something dangerous. Something that in his world could get people killed. "He's asleep," Shannon said unnecessarily, her voice soft to avoid waking the baby. "He ate well. He'll probably sleep for a few hours now." She moved to hand Jiang Wu back, but Minjun's hand shot out to stop her, his fingers wrapping around her wrist with surprising gentleness. "Your name," he demanded, though his tone had lost its edge. "Shannon. Shannon Jordan." "Minjun Yoon." He released her wrist, taking Jiang Wu from her arms with practiced care. His son barely stirred, too content to wake. "I owe you a debt, Shannon Jordan." "You don't owe me anything." Shannon began buttoning her blouse, suddenly aware of how intimate this situation was. "I was happy to help. In my world, everything comes with a price." Minjun's eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "And what you just did, feeding my son, giving him peace when nothing else could. That's not something I can simply walk away from." Something in his tone made Shannon's heart race with more than attraction. It sounded almost like a warning. "I should get back to my seat." "Wait." The word was command, not request. Minjun shifted Jiang Wu to one arm with the ease of someone who'd been doing this alone for weeks, then pulled a business card from his suit pocket. "Call me when we land. I want to properly thank you." Shannon took the card reflexively, her fingers brushing his. The contact sent electricity up her arm, and from the slight widening of his eyes, he'd felt it too. "That's not necessary. It is to me." His voice had gone soft, dangerous. "You gave my son something precious. The least I can do is buy you dinner." Shannon knew she should say no. Everything about this man screamed danger, from the way other passengers averted their eyes when he passed to the bodyguards, who shadowed his movements. But there was something in his expression when he looked at his son, a vulnerability that called to her own broken heart. "Dinner," she found herself agreeing. "Just dinner." A ghost of a smile touched Minjun's lips, transforming his face from dangerous to devastatingly handsome. "Just dinner," he echoed, though something in his tone suggested he was making a promise neither of them understood yet. Shannon returned to her seat in a daze, the warmth of Jiang Wu's small body still imprinted on her skin. She didn't notice the way Minjun's bodyguards were already pulling up information on her. Didn't see the calculating look in Minjun's eyes as he watched her walk away. In his world, the world of the Korean underworld where tradition ran deeper than blood, what had just happened wasn't simple. It wasn't just a kind stranger helping a child in need. In the old ways, the ways his grandfather had taught him, the ways that still governed the ancient crime families, a woman who nursed a boss's child became bound to that family, became bound to him. Shannon Jordan had just fed his son. She'd given Jiang Wu the one thing Minjun couldn't provide, the one thing he'd been desperate for since Kira's death. In doing so, she'd fulfilled a role that, in the traditions of their world, made her something sacred, made her his. Minjun looked down at his peacefully sleeping son and felt the ghost of his grandfather's words echo through his mind. When a woman feeds your child from her own body, she becomes the child's mother. And a boss's child can have only one mother, his wife. He hadn't believed in the old ways. Not really. They were superstitions, traditions from a different era. But holding Jiang Wu truly at peace for the first time since birth, Minjun felt the weight of those ancient rules settling over him like a mantle. Shannon Jordan didn't know it yet. But the moment she'd offered to feed his son, she'd stepped into his world. And in his world, some things were sacred. Some bonds couldn't be broken. Some debts could only be paid one way. The plane continued its journey through the clouds, carrying two broken souls toward a destiny neither had seen coming. Shannon Jordan, the neonatal nurse running from her grief, and Min Jun-yoon, the Korean mafia boss who'd just found something more precious than power. Someone who could give his son the love of a mother. But love in his world came with a price, and that price was written in tradition older than Korea itself. Shannon had saved his son's life tonight, even if she didn't realize it. Jiang Wu had been slowly starving, refusing every bottle, growing weaker each day. The doctors had talked about feeding tubes, about hospitalization. But one act of compassion from a stranger had solved what weeks of medical intervention couldn't. And Min Jun-yoon always paid his debts. Always. Stories like this don't just entertain, they transform. Subscribe and let's keep discovering them together. Now, let's continue. The black Mercedes that picked up Shannon from LAX 3 days later was not what she'd expected. She'd imagined a normal restaurant. Maybe something upscale given Min Jun's obvious wealth. Instead, the driver, a man built like a wall with cold eyes and an earpiece, had escorted her into a vehicle that screamed federal protection or something darker. The windows were tinted so dark she couldn't see out, and the locks engaged with an ominous click the moment her door closed. "Where are we going?" Shannon tried to keep her voice steady as the Mercedes pulled into traffic. "Mr. Yoon's estate, miss." The driver's eyes met hers in the rearview mirror. "He thought you'd be more comfortable with a private dinner." Given the baby. Mr. Yoon's estate. Not a restaurant, not a public place. Shannon's stomach twisted as pieces began clicking into place. The bodyguards on the plane, the way passengers had given him a wide berth, the ease with which he commanded others. The formal way the driver said Mr. Yoon with a deference that went beyond simple employment. Oh, God. What had she gotten herself into? The Mercedes wound through the streets of Los Angeles before heading into the hills. Each mile took them farther from public spaces and closer to sprawling estates hidden behind gates and walls. When they finally turned through a particular gate, this one guarded by two men with very obvious weapons, Shannon felt her heart climb into her throat. The estate was massive, a modern architectural marvel that looked like something out of a Korean drama. Clean lines, floor-to-ceiling windows, landscaping that probably cost more than Shannon's yearly salary. Everything screamed wealth and power and danger. Miss Jordan? A woman in her 50s appeared at the entrance, her severe expression softening slightly as she looked Shannon over. I'm Mrs. Cho, the house manager. Mr. Yoon is waiting in the nursery. If you'll follow me. Nursery. Right. Because this was about Jang Woo. Shannon clung to that thought as Mrs. Cho led her through a home that belonged in Architectural Digest. Polished concrete floors, minimalist furniture, art that was probably worth more than Shannon's car. Everything screamed wealth and danger in equal measure. They climbed a floating staircase to the second floor, and Shannon heard it before she saw it. Jang Woo's cries, not as desperate as on the plane, but still distressed. Mrs. Cho opened a door to reveal a nursery that was both luxurious and surprisingly warm, decorated in soft grays and whites, with a mural of Seoul's skyline covering one wall. Min Jun stood by the window, Jang Woo wailing in his arms, his expression tight with frustration. He'd shed the suit jacket and rolled up his sleeves, revealing forearms corded with muscle and, Shannon's breath caught, extensive tattoos that disappeared beneath the fabric. Not random tattoos. These were deliberate, symbolic. She recognized a few of the images. A tiger. What looked like family crests, the kind of ink that told stories in the Korean underworld. Shannon. His voice was rough with relief as he turned. Thank God. He's been asking for you. Asking for me? Shannon's voice came out higher than intended. Minjun, what is this? Who are you really? Something flickered in his dark eyes. Respect, maybe, that she was asking directly. He gestured to Mrs. Cho, who slipped out silently, closing the door behind her. Suddenly, Shannon was alone with the most dangerous-looking man she'd ever met, and his crying infant. I think you already know, Minjun said quietly, still rocking Jang Woo. You're smart. You've put the pieces together. You're with organized crime. It wasn't a question. I am organized crime. At least, I'm the head of the Yoon family. We control most of the Korean operations in Seoul and expanding here in Los Angeles. Shipping, real estate, entertainment. Some legitimate, some... He paused. Less legitimate. Shannon backed toward the door, her hand fumbling for the handle. I need to leave. Jang Woo needs you. Minjun's voice stopped her, not because it was commanding, but because it was broken. Look at him, Shannon. Really look. Against her better judgment, Shannon did. The baby in Minjun's arms was thinner than he'd been on the plane. His cries had a weak quality to them that made her nurse's instincts scream alarm. Dark circles shadowed his tiny eyes, and his skin had lost the healthy flush infants should have. What happened? She was moving forward before she could stop herself. He looked fine 3 days ago. He won't eat. Minjun's jaw clenched. Not the bottle, not anything. He took 1 bottle the night we landed, and since then he's refused everything. The pediatrician wants to hospitalize him, put in a feeding tube. But His voice cracked. I can't do that to him. He's already lost his mother. If I could give him what he needs, I would, but you can't. Shannon finished, understanding flooding through her. She reached for Jang Woo, and the moment the baby was in her arms, his cries diminished to whimpers. He turned his face against her chest, rooting instinctively. Oh, sweetheart, you're so hungry, aren't you? I'm sorry. Minjun ran a hand through his hair, the gesture making him look younger, more vulnerable. I know this isn't fair to you. I know I have no right to ask. But when I saw how he responded to you on the plane, how peaceful he was. Shannon, I haven't seen my son peaceful since the day he was born, not once. Shannon looked from the baby in her arms to the man before her. This terrifying, powerful, dangerous man who was also a desperate father trying to save his child. She thought of Zoe, of how she would have moved heaven and earth to keep her daughter alive, how she'd have begged, borrowed, or stolen anything that could have prevented that terrible morning. "This is insane," she whispered. "I know. You're a criminal. Yes. I should run out that door and never look back. Probably. But he needs to eat." Shannon looked down at Jiang Wu, whose whimpers had turned to hiccuping sobs as he continued to search for sustenance. "And I can help him. I'll pay you." Minjun spoke quickly, urgently. "Whatever you want. A salary, a house, anything. Just help him. Please." The please did it. This man, who clearly wasn't used to asking for anything, who probably ruled his world with absolute authority, was begging her to save his son. "Can you give us privacy?" Shannon asked quietly. Minjun nodded and moved toward the door, but Shannon's voice stopped him. "Wait. I need to know something first." She met his eyes directly, refusing to look away, despite how intimidating he was. "On the plane, you said I'd stepped into your world, that what I did created some kind of debt. What did you mean?" A muscle in Minjun's jaw ticked. For a long moment, he didn't answer, and Shannon thought he might not. Then he sighed, the sound heavy with the weight of tradition. "My grandfather was born in Busan," he began, his accent thickening slightly as he spoke of his heritage. "He brought the old ways with him when he built this family. One of those traditions is about children, specifically about who feeds them." "I don't understand." "In the old families, blood isn't the only thing that makes family. Milk does too." Minjun's eyes were intense, burning with something Shannon couldn't name. When a woman nurses a child that isn't biologically hers, especially the child of a boss, she becomes bound to that family, becomes sacred to them. In the oldest traditions, she becomes what? Shannon's heart was pounding. "The child's mother," Minjun finished. "And in our world, a boss's child can have only one mother, his wife." The silence that followed was deafening. Shannon stared at him, trying to process what he'd just said, trying to understand if he was saying what she thought he was saying. "You can't be serious." "I don't expect you to marry me," Minjun said quickly. This isn't the Joseon dynasty. But in my world, what you did on that plane, it means something. It means you're under my family's protection now, whether you want it or not. It means other families will see you as connected to us. And it means—" He stopped, seeming to struggle with the words. "It means I can't let you walk away." "Can't let me?" Shannon's voice rose. "You don't own me. I'm not some possession you can claim because of an old superstition." "It's not a superstition to the people I deal with." Minjun's voice hardened. "The moment word gets out that you nursed my son, and it will get out, Shannon. Things like this don't stay secret in my world. You'll become a target. Rival families will see you as a way to get to me. You'll need protection. My protection." "Then I won't do it again." Shannon held Jiang Wu closer even as the baby's whimpers intensified. "I'll help him today. Make sure he's eating properly. And then I'll leave. No one needs to know. Mrs. Cho already knows. My driver knows. My security team knows." Minjun stepped closer, and Shannon fought the urge to back away. "And in about 3 hours when my underboss comes for his weekly report, he'll know. By tomorrow, every Korean family from here to Seoul will know that Min Jun Yoon's son has a wet nurse. That's how fast information travels in this world. Then tell them I'm just an employee, a hired nurse. It doesn't work like that." Frustration colored his tone. "The symbolism matters. The act itself matters. You gave my son something precious, something intimate. In the eyes of the old families, that makes you precious. It makes you mine to protect. I'm not yours." But even as Shannon said it, Jang Woo let out a desperate cry, and she felt her body respond. milk letting down despite her emotional state. The baby sensed it too, rooting more frantically against her shirt. Minjun saw her wince, saw the understanding in her eyes that her body was betraying her resolve. "He needs you," he said softly. "And like it or not, you need me now too. Because I promise you, Shannon Jordan, the moment other families find out about this, your life will never be the same." Shannon looked down at the suffering infant in her arms, then back up at the dangerous man before her. Every rational part of her brain screamed to run, to get as far from this world as possible. But she was a nurse. She'd taken an oath to help those in need, and this baby, this innocent child who'd lost his mother the day he was born, needed her desperately. 1 week, she heard herself say. "I'll stay 1 week. Help get him established on a bottle. Work with a lactation consultant to find a solution. But then I'm gone. And you tell everyone I was just a temporary medical solution. No weird mafia marriage traditions, no sacred bonds. Just a professional arrangement." Minjun's expression was unreadable. 1 week. "And I want it in writing. A contract that says I'm free to leave after 7 days with no retaliation, no following me, no claiming me as some kind of property." "Done." He pulled out his phone. "I'll have my lawyer draw it up within the hour." Shannon nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She turned away from him, settling into the plush rocking chair positioned near the window. "Privacy," she repeated. This time, Minjun left without argument, pulling the door closed behind him. Shannon heard him post someone outside. Of course he did. He probably had guards everywhere. But for now, she was alone with Jiang Wu. "Okay, little one," she whispered, unbuttoning her shirt with shaking hands. "Let's get you fed." Jiang Wu latched on immediately, his desperate suckling gradually easing into the rhythmic pull of a satisfied infant. Shannon closed her eyes, tears streaming down her face as she rocked him. This was wrong on so many levels. She was feeding a crime lord's baby, sitting in a mansion bought with blood money, trapped by traditions older than America itself. But God, it felt right to have a baby in her arms again, to feel needed. To feel like maybe she could save this one, even though she'd failed to save Zoe. When stories challenge everything you thought you knew, that's when they matter most. Subscribe and stay with us. Now, let's continue. Outside the door, Minjun leaned against the wall, listening to the silence that meant his son was finally eating, finally at peace. He pulled out his phone and made a call. "Taeyang, I need you here now. And bring the lawyer." He paused, listening to his underboss's response. "Because we have a situation. The baby has a wet nurse." He could practically hear Taeyang's shock through the phone. In their world, everyone would know exactly what that meant. "Yeah," Minjun continued, his voice grim. "I know what the traditions say. That's why we need the lawyer. I need to figure out how to protect her without—" He stopped, not wanting to voice what the old ways would demand, what his grandfather would have insisted upon without question. When a woman nurses a boss's child, she becomes the boss's wife. Not through ceremony or paperwork, but through an act older and more binding than any legal contract, through the sacred act of sustaining the family's heir. Minjun had told Shannon he didn't expect her to marry him, and he'd meant it. He didn't believe in forcing women into anything. Traditions be damned. But he also knew that in the eyes of every old-school family from Seoul to Los Angeles, the moment Shannon Jordan had put Jiang Wu to her breast, she'd become the Yoon family's queen, whether she wanted the crown or not. And that meant Minjun had to protect her. Had to claim her publicly as under his protection before rival families decided to make their own moves. Had to make it clear that touching Shannon Jordan was tantamount to declaring war on the Yoon family. He just had to figure out how to do that without making her hate him in the process. Inside the nursery, Shannon held Jiang Wu as he nursed, completely unaware that she'd just become the most valuable and most dangerous woman in the Korean-American underworld. Unaware that Min Jun-yoon's rivals were already making plans, seeing opportunity in this unexpected development. Unaware that the man outside that door was already falling for her, drawn to her courage and compassion in ways that terrified him. Because in his world, love was a weakness. Love got people killed. But his son needed her, and increasingly, Minjun was realizing he needed her too. 1 week, she'd said. 7 days to get Jongwoo eating properly, and then she'd walk away. Minjun stared at the closed nursery door and made a decision that would change everything. He'd give her the week. Let her think she could leave. Let her feel safe enough to lower her guard. And in that time, he'd show her that despite the darkness of his world, despite the blood on his hands, he could be what she and Jangwoo needed. Because 1 week wasn't going to be enough. Not nearly enough for any of them. 5 days into Shannon's 1 week agreement, the estate had become a strange kind of home. She'd been given a bedroom suite adjacent to the nursery. For convenience, Mrs. Cho had explained, though Shannon suspected it was more about keeping her close and secure. The rooms were beautiful, decorated in soft creams and natural woods, with a bathroom that had a soaking tub overlooking the city lights. Everything screamed luxury and comfort and captivity. Shannon spent most of her time in the nursery with Jiang Wu, feeding him every 3 hours, learning his rhythms, watching him slowly regain the healthy flush that babies should have. Min Jun was there for almost every feeding, sitting in the corner chair like a silent guardian, watching his son nurse with an expression that twisted Shannon's heart. He never pressured her, never crossed lines, but his presence was constant and increasingly magnetic. "He's gaining weight," Shannon said on the 5th evening, Jiang Wu sleeping peacefully in her arms after his feeding. "Another few days and he'll be strong enough to try transitioning to expressed milk in bottles." "Good." But Minjun's tone didn't sound pleased. He looked tense, wound tight, his jaw locked in that way she was starting to recognize meant he was holding something back. "What's wrong? We need to talk." He stood, moving to close the nursery door more firmly. "About the situation." Shannon's stomach dropped. "What situation?" Word got out. He ran a hand through his hair, messing the perfectly styled black strands. "About you. About what you're doing for Jiang Wu. 3 families have already reached out, making inquiries." "Inquiries?" "Polite ways of asking if I've claimed you formally." His eyes met hers, dark and intense. "If you're under my protection as just an employee, or as something more." "And what did you tell them?" "That you're mine." The words came out rough, possessive. "That anyone who touches you answers to me." Shannon should have been angry, should have railed against being called his. But something about the fierce protectiveness in his voice made her feel safe, instead of trapped. "So, I'm a prisoner here. You're protected here." Minjun moved closer and Shannon's pulse quickened. "There's a difference. You can leave. I signed the contract, remember? But if you leave, I can't guarantee your safety. The Park family has already made noises about wanting to meet the woman nursing the Yoon heir." "Why would they want to meet me?" "Because you're valuable." He stopped just short of touching her, close enough that she could see flecks of amber in his dark eyes. "In the old ways, the woman who nurses a boss's child holds almost as much power as the boss himself. She's sacred, protected, and—" He hesitated. "And what?" "And if something happened to me, you and Jiang Wu would be the logical successors to control the family." The words fell like stones between them. "That makes you dangerous to my rivals and valuable to my allies." Shannon's arms tightened around the sleeping baby. "This is insane." "This is my world." Minjun's voice softened. "I'm sorry you got pulled into it, but Shannon—" He paused, seeming to wrestle with something. "I'm not sorry you're here." The confession hung in the air between them, charged and dangerous. Shannon's breath caught as she watched emotions flicker across his usually controlled face. Vulnerability, want, something that looked dangerously like affection. Minjun, let me finish. He cut her off gently. These past 5 days, watching you with my son, seeing him peaceful and healthy because of you. Shannon, you gave us both something I thought was lost forever. A chance at normal. At family. I'm not your family, I'm just helping. You are family. He reached out slowly, telegraphing his movement so she could pull away if she wanted. When she didn't, his hand cupped her cheek with surprising gentleness. The moment you fed Jiang Wu, you became family. Maybe not in the legal sense, maybe not in the way the modern world understands, but in the ways that matter to me, to my son. You're already ours. Shannon knew she should pull away, should remind him about their agreement, about the 2 days she had left before leaving. Should definitely not be leaning into his touch like a flower toward sunlight. This can't happen, she whispered, but her body betrayed her words, swaying closer to him. Why not? His thumb stroked her cheekbone, and Shannon felt the calluses there, evidence that this man wasn't just a suit-wearing executive, but someone who knew how to use his hands, how to fight, how to survive. Because you're dangerous, because your world is violent and dark, and I've already lost. Her voice broke. I can't lose anyone else. I can't watch someone else die. Understanding flooded Minjun's expression. Zoe. Shannon flinched. How do you know about? I had you investigated. He said it without apology. The moment you offered to feed Jiang Wu on that plane, I had my people pull everything about you. I know about your daughter. About the SIDS diagnosis. About the fact that you haven't worked since it happened. That you've been in grief counseling. That you're rebuilding a life that feels impossible to rebuild. Shannon should have been furious about the invasion of privacy, should have slapped him and stormed out. But instead, she felt oddly relieved that he knew, that she didn't have to explain the gaping wound in her heart. Then you understand why this can't be more than a temporary arrangement, she said softly. Why I can't get attached to Jiang Wu, or to... She stopped, unable to finish. Or to me. Minjun's jaw clenched. Shannon, I know loss. I watched Kira die bringing our son into the world. Watched her bleed out while doctors tried everything to save her. I held her hand as the light left her eyes, knowing that I was losing my wife, and my son was losing his mother before he'd even taken his first breath. Tears streamed down Shannon's face. I'm so sorry. Don't be sorry. Just don't write us off because you're scared. He leaned closer, his forehead nearly touching hers. These past few days I've watched you be so brave. Brave enough to feed a stranger's child. Brave enough to walk into a world you didn't understand. Brave enough to love my son, even knowing you'd have to leave him. Don't tell me you're too scared to try. Try what? Shannon's voice was barely a whisper. This. And then he was kissing her. It was gentle at first, a soft press of lips that asked permission rather than demanding surrender. Shannon froze for half a heartbeat, Jiang Wu still sleeping in her arms, every rational thought screaming that this was wrong. But then Minjun's hand slid into her hair, and she melted into the kiss like she was coming home. He tasted like green tea and danger, and something uniquely him that made her head spin. His other hand came up to cradle her face, holding her like she was precious, like she was sacred. The kiss deepened, and Shannon felt months of walls crumbling around her heart. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Minjun rested his forehead against hers. Stay, he whispered. Not for a week. Stay. I can't. You can. His voice was fierce now, desperate. Jiang Wu needs you. I need you. And unless I'm completely misreading things, you need us too. Shannon looked down at the sleeping baby in her arms, then back up at the dangerous, beautiful man offering her a life she'd never imagined, a life that terrified her. A life that somehow felt more real than anything she'd experienced in months. "I'm scared," she admitted. "So am I." Minjun kissed her forehead, soft and reverent. "But I'm more scared of letting you walk away." Before Shannon could respond, Jangwoo stirred, letting out a small whimper. She automatically began rocking him, maternal instincts kicking in. Minjun watched them, and the expression on his face stole Shannon's breath, possessive and protective and full of so much longing it hurt. "Let me put him down," she said softly. Together they moved to the crib, a beautiful piece of handcrafted wood that probably cost more than Shannon's car. She laid Jangwoo down gently, and Minjun immediately adjusted the blanket, checked the baby monitor, performed all the little rituals of a father who'd been doing this alone for 3 months. When he straightened, Shannon was right there. And suddenly, the air between them was charged again. The nursery lights were dimmed, Jangwoo's soft breathing the only sound. They were alone in this bubble of domesticity, and Shannon felt the last of her resistance crumbling. "I should go to my room," she said, but didn't move. "You should," Minjun agreed, also not moving. "We need boundaries." "We do. This is happening too fast." "It is." But when his hand found the small of her back, pulling her closer, Shannon didn't resist. When he kissed her again, deeper this time, with the hunger of a man who'd been holding back for days, she kissed him back with equal fervor. They stumbled away from the crib, mindful of the sleeping baby, until Shannon's back hit the wall and Minjun was pressing against her, all hard muscle and controlled power. "Tell me to stop," he murmured against her lips. "I should. But will you?" Shannon looked up into his eyes, those dark, dangerous eyes that somehow made her feel safer than she had in months, and made a decision that would change everything. "No." The word was barely out before his mouth was on hers again, and Shannon forgot all the reasons this was a terrible idea. Forgot about his criminal empire, about the danger, about the fact that she'd known him less than a week. All she could feel was his warmth, his strength, the way he held her like she was something precious he'd been searching for his whole life. When they finally broke apart, both panting, Minjun rested his forehead against hers. 2 more days, he said. "Your contract gives you 2 more days before you're free to leave." "Yes. If you still want to leave after that, I won't stop you. I'll honor our agreement." His hands framed her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. "But Shannon, I'm going to spend those 2 days convincing you to stay. I'm going to show you that what we could have, what we could be, it's worth the risk." "And if I still want to leave?" Pain flickered across his features, but he nodded. "Then I'll let you go. I'll make sure you're protected. Set up somewhere safe where the other families can't touch you. But I'll let you go." Shannon searched his face, looking for lies, for manipulation, for any sign that this was a trap. But all she saw was honesty and a vulnerability that this powerful man probably showed to no one else. "Okay," she whispered. 2 days. Something fierce and possessive flashed in Minjun's eyes. 2 days, he repeated. Then he kissed her once more, soft and reverent, before forcing himself to step back. "Get some rest. Jangwoo will be hungry in a few hours." Shannon nodded, her lips still tingling from his kisses, and slipped out of the nursery. Her legs felt shaky as she walked the short distance to her room, her mind spinning with everything that had just happened. She'd kissed him. She'd agreed to let him try to convince her to stay. She was falling for a man who probably had more blood on his hands than she wanted to know about. But God help her, when she was in his arms, none of that seemed to matter. Shannon locked her bedroom door and leaned against it, one hand pressed to her racing heart. 2 days. In 2 days, she'd either be walking away from the first man who'd made her feel alive since losing Zoe, or she'd be stepping fully into a world that terrified her. She didn't know which option scared her more. Down the hall, Minjun stood in the nursery, watching his son sleep peacefully. For the first time since Kira's death, he felt something other than guilt and grief. He felt hope. He felt the stirrings of something that might be happiness. Shannon Jordan had walked into their lives like salvation, offering light when he'd been drowning in darkness. And now he had 2 days to make her understand that this thing between them wasn't just about Jiang Wu needing a mother, or about ancient traditions binding them together. It was about the fact that when he looked at her, he didn't see the broken nurse running from her grief. He saw his future. He saw the woman who could stand beside him, who could be strong enough to survive in his world, who could love his son as fiercely as he did. He saw his queen. The problem was, Shannon didn't see herself that way. Not yet. She still saw herself as the woman who'd failed to save her daughter, as someone too broken to take on something as big as loving them. Minjun pulled out his phone and sent a text to Tae Yang. Cancel all meetings for the next 2 days. I'm not to be disturbed unless the city is burning. 2 days to convince Shannon Jordan that despite the darkness, despite the danger, despite every rational reason she had to run, she belonged here with them. 2 days to make her fall in love with them. Min Jun-yoon had built an empire through force of will and ruthless determination. Surely he could win one woman's heart in 2 days. As Jang Woo let out a soft sigh in his sleep, Min Jun made a silent vow. He would give Shannon every reason to stay and no reason to leave. He would show her the man beneath the title, the father beneath the boss, the heart beneath the armor. And if she still chose to leave after that, then he'd have to let her go, even if it destroyed him. But first he'd fight like hell to make her want to stay. The game was on, and Min Jun-yoon never lost, not when it mattered this much. Some bonds can't be broken, some stories demand to be told. Subscribe and let's keep going. Now, let's continue. Shannon woke to chaos. The explosion shattered the pre-dawn silence, rattling windows throughout the estate. She bolted upright, heart hammering, and her first thought was, Jiang Wu. She ran barefoot across the hall into the nursery. Finding Min Jun already there, his son clutched protectively against his chest. What's happening? Shannon's voice trembled. They made their move. Min Jun's face was carved from stone, all vulnerability from their kiss the night before, replaced by the cold boss she'd glimpsed on the plane. The Parks. They just bombed my warehouse in Koreatown. Before Shannon could respond, Tae Yang burst through the door, blood streaking his temple. Boss, it's a distraction. They hit 3 locations simultaneously, and they left a message. He glanced at Shannon, hesitation clear. Say it, Min Jun commanded. They want the woman. They said if you don't hand over the Yoon's wet nurse by midnight, they'll level every property you own. The room spun around Shannon. This was her fault. Her presence had painted a target on this family. Give me to them. The words tumbled out before she could stop them. If it stops the war, no. Min Jun's voice was absolute, brooking no argument. He handed Jiang Wu to Mrs. Cho, who had appeared silently in the doorway. Take him to the safe room, now. Then he was in front of Shannon, his hands gripping her shoulders with barely controlled intensity. Listen to me very carefully. You are under my protection. That means I would burn this entire city to the ground before I let anyone take you. Do you understand? Shannon saw it then. The monster everyone feared. His eyes had gone black and cold, his whole body radiating lethal intent. But his hands on her shoulders remained gentle, even as fury rolled off him in waves. They'll kill you, she whispered. They'll try. A dangerous smile curved his lips. They'll fail. But Shannon... His expression softened fractionally. I need you to trust me. Can you do that? She should say no, should demand he let her leave, end this before more people died. But looking into his eyes, seeing the fierce protectiveness there, she found herself nodding. Good. He pulled her close, pressing a hard kiss to her forehead. Tae Yang will take you to the safe room with Jiang Woo. Stay there until I come for you. Don't open the door for anyone else. Minjun. I'll come back. He cupped her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. I promise you, Shannon Jordan, I will come back. We have 2 days left. Remember? I'm not done convincing you to stay. Then he was gone, barking orders in rapid Korean as he strode from the nursery. Shannon stood frozen until Tae Yang touched her arm gently. Miss Jordan, we need to move. The safe room was deep in the estate's basement, accessed through a hidden door in the wine cellar. It was surprisingly comfortable, a full apartment with bedrooms, kitchen, and enough supplies to last weeks. Mrs. Cho was already there with Jiang Woo, the baby miraculously still sleeping through the chaos. How long will we be here? Shannon asked, as Tae Yang secured the heavy door. However long it takes. Mrs. Cho's face was grim. Mr. Yoon won't rest until every threat is eliminated. Hours crawled by. Shannon fed Jiang Woo when he woke, her body going through the familiar motions while her mind screamed with worry. What was happening up there? Was Minjun safe? How many people were dying because of her? When Jiang Woo finally went back to sleep in the portable crib, Shannon found herself pacing like a caged animal. Mrs. Cho watched her with knowing eyes. You love him, the older woman said quietly. It wasn't a question. I barely know him. That doesn't answer my question. Shannon stopped pacing, her shoulders slumping. How can I love someone whose world is so violent, someone who probably has blood on his hands? My husband worked for Mr. Yoon's father, Mrs. Cho said. 25 years in this life. It took him in the end, a rival's bullet meant for the old boss. But those 25 years were full of love, loyalty, and family. Yes, there was darkness. There's always darkness in this world. But there was light too. Does the light make up for the darkness? That's for you to decide, Miss Jordan. Mrs. Cho stood, moving toward the small kitchen. But I'll tell you this. I've worked for the Yoon family for 30 years. I've seen 2 generations of leaders, and I've never seen one look at a woman the way Minjun looks at you, like you're his salvation. Shannon was still processing those words when the lights flickered. Once, twice. Then the backup generator kicked in, bathing everything in emergency lighting. What does that mean? Shannon's voice rose with panic. Mrs. Cho's face had gone pale. It means someone cut the main power. It means they're here. The sound of gunfire erupted from somewhere above them, muffled but unmistakable. Shannon ran to Jiang Woo's crib, scooping him up protectively. The baby woke with a startled cry, sensing the tension. Then the lights went out completely. In the darkness, Shannon heard Mrs. Cho move closer, heard the distinctive sound of a gun being cocked. Stay behind me, the older woman commanded, all grandmotherly warmth replaced by cold efficiency, more gunfire, shouting, the sounds of combat filtering down through the reinforced walls. Shannon clutched Jiang Woo tighter, tears streaming down her face as she whispered nonsense reassurances to the crying infant. This was her fault. All of it. If she'd just walked away on that plane. The door to the safe room shook with impact. Once. Twice. Someone was trying to break through. Mrs. Cho? Shannon's voice cracked. They can't get through that door, Mrs. Cho assured her, but Shannon heard the uncertainty beneath the confidence. It's reinforced steel. It would take... An explosion rocked the room, smaller than the warehouse blast, but devastating in the confined space. Shannon's ears rang as smoke poured through a crack that had appeared in the supposedly impenetrable door. Run! Mrs. Cho shoved Shannon toward the back of the safe room. There's an emergency exit behind the bookshelf. Take Jiang Woo and run. What about you? I'll slow them down. Mrs. Cho raised her gun, her expression resolute. Go, Miss Jordan. Mr. Yoon is counting on you to keep his son safe. Shannon ran, Jiang Wu screaming in her arms, fumbling for the hidden latch Mrs. Cho had shown her during the safety briefing. The bookshelf swung open, revealing a narrow tunnel barely lit by battery-powered emergency lights. Behind her, she heard the safe room door finally give way, heard Mrs. Cho's gunfire, once, twice, 3 times, heard a man's voice shout in Korean. Then she was in the tunnel, running blindly through the darkness with Jiang Wu clutched to her chest, not knowing if she was running toward safety or into the arms of the enemy. Not knowing if Min Jun was alive or dead. Not knowing if she'd ever get the chance to tell him that yes, God help her, she did love him. The tunnel seemed endless, but finally Shannon saw light ahead. She burst out into the night air, finding herself in the hills behind the estate. In the distance, she could see flames rising from the house, could hear the sounds of combat. And then she heard something else, a car engine getting closer. Shannon turned to run deeper into the hills, but it was too late. The black SUV screeched to a stop, and men poured out. Not Min Jun's men. She knew that instantly from the way they moved, from the predatory smiles on their faces. One of them stepped forward, older, with cold eyes and a smile that made Shannon's blood freeze. "The famous wet nurse," he said in heavily accented English. "Finally. Take her." Shannon fought, screaming, but it was useless. They were professionals, and she was just a terrified nurse trying to protect a baby. The last thing she saw before they forced a cloth over her mouth was the mansion burning in the distance, smoke rising like a funeral pyre into the dawn sky. Then darkness claimed her, and Shannon Jordan disappeared into the night with the Yoon air in her arms, wondering if the man she'd fallen for would even survive long enough to search for her. Shannon woke in a room that reeked of old money and older sins. Her head pounded from whatever they'd used to knock her out, but her first thought was Jiang Wu. She bolted upright to find the baby sleeping peacefully in an ornate bassinet beside the bed where she'd been placed. Relief flooded through her. They hadn't hurt him. Awake finally. The voice came from the shadows. The older man from the hills stepped into the light. "I am Changho Park, and you, my dear, are worth your weight in gold." "Where are we?" Shannon's voice was hoarse. "My estate, about 50 miles from the Yoon mansion, or what's left of it." His smile was cruel. "Don't worry. Your beloved boss is alive. For now. I made sure word reached him about where to find you. You want him to come." Understanding dawned with horror. "Of course. Min Jun Yoon destroyed my family 10 years ago, killed my sons, took my territory, left me with nothing but scraps. And now?" He gestured to Jiang Wu. "Now he cares about something. Finally, after a decade of being untouchable, he has a weakness. 2 weaknesses, actually." He moved closer, and Shannon pressed herself back against the headboard. "You and his precious heir, the sacred wet nurse and the son who bears the Yoon name. Tell me, does he love you?" "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't play stupid." Chung Ho's hand shot out, gripping her chin painfully. "I've seen the reports. The way he looks at you. The way he's protected you. Min Jun Yoon hasn't cared about anything since his wife died, but he cares about you. And that is going to destroy him." He released her, smoothing his suit. "He'll come for you tonight. I've made sure of it. And when he does, when he walks through those doors willing to trade everything for your safety, I'll take it all. His empire, his power, his life, everything." "He'll kill you," Shannon said, trying to sound brave. "Perhaps. But first, he'll have to watch me hurt what he loves. And that will be worth dying for." The hours that followed were torture. Shannon stayed close to Jiang Wu, feeding him when he cried, changing him with supplies Chang Ho's people had thoughtfully provided. They wanted the baby healthy, wanted him as leverage when Min Jun arrived. As dusk fell, Chang Ho returned. "He's here. Earlier than expected, actually. Your boss must be quite motivated." He hauled Shannon to her feet. "Come. You'll want to see this. He dragged her to a large study. Jiang Wu clutched in her arms and positioned her near the window where she could see the grounds below. Her heart stopped. Minjun stood alone in the center of the courtyard, illuminated by floodlights. No bodyguards, no weapons visible, his hands raised in surrender. But even from this distance, Shannon could see the coiled violence in his stance, the barely leashed fury in his posture. "Park!" His voice carried clearly through the open window. "I'm here. Let them go." Chang Ho laughed, pushing Shannon closer to the window so Minjun could see her. The moment their eyes met across the distance, Shannon saw Minjun's mask crack. Raw emotion flooded his face: relief, fear, love. "Your empire for the woman and child," Chang Ho called down. "Sign over everything. Territory, businesses, operations, all of it. Make me boss of the Yoon family and I'll let them live." "Done." Minjun didn't hesitate. "I'll sign whatever you want. Just don't hurt them." Shannon's eyes widened with shock. He was giving up everything. His entire world, his power, his legacy, for her and Jiang Wu. "Touching," Chang Ho sneered. "But I think we both know I can't let you live, Yoon. You'd just rebuild. Come after me." "No, you have to die. But first, you'll watch me take everything." He pulled a gun, pressing it to Shannon's temple. Starting with her. Everything happened in slow motion. Shannon saw Minjun move impossibly fast for someone who was supposed to be unarmed. His hand went to his ankle, came up with a weapon. At the same moment, Shannon did the only thing she could think of. She bit down hard on Chang Ho's wrist, making him jerk the gun away from her head. The shot went wide. Glass shattered. And then the world exploded into chaos. Doors burst open. Minjun's men poured in. They'd been there all along, hidden, waiting. But Minjun himself was already inside, moving like death incarnate. Shannon had never seen anything so terrifying or so beautiful. Chang Ho grabbed for her again, but Shannon was done being a victim. She swung Jiang Wu's bassinet at his knee, the baby safely in her arms, and the old man stumbled. It was all the opening Minjun needed. "You touched what's mine!" Minjun snarled, and his fist connected with Chang Ho's jaw with a crack that echoed through the room. The fight was brutal but brief. Chang Ho was old, past his prime. Minjun was in his prime and fueled by fury. When it was over, Chang Ho was on his knees, bleeding, defeated. "Kill me," he spat. "End it." Minjun leveled his gun at the old man's head. Shannon saw his finger tighten on the trigger, saw the cold calculation in his eyes. This was the monster, the killer, the boss who'd built his empire on violence. "Minjun." Shannon's voice cut through the haze. "Don't." He looked at her, and Shannon saw him warring with himself, saw the darkness battling with the man she'd come to know. "He tried to kill you," Minjun growled. "He put his hands on you. On my son." "I know." Shannon walked closer, Jiang Wu sleeping miraculously in her arms. "But if you kill him like this, in cold blood while I watch, you'll lose yourself. And I need you. Jiang Wu needs you. Not the boss, not the monster. We need the man." The silence stretched. Then Minjun lowered his gun. "Take him," he ordered his men. "Turn him over to the families. Let them decide his fate for breaking the old laws by targeting a sacred woman." As Chang Ho was dragged away screaming threats, Minjun turned to Shannon. For a moment, they just stared at each other. Then he crossed the distance in 2 strides, pulling her and Jiang Wu into his arms. "I thought I'd lost you," he whispered into her hair. "When I saw the safe room breached, when I couldn't find you. Shannon, I thought I'd lost you both." "You found us." Shannon pulled back enough to look at his face. "You gave up everything to save us." "I'd give up everything 1,000 times over." He cupped her face with shaking hands. "None of it matters without you. The empire, the power, the name. It all means nothing if you're not here." "The families won't accept that," Shannon said. You can't just walk away from being a boss. Watch me. His eyes blazed with determination. I'm done with this life, Shannon. I'm done with violence and death and living in darkness. You made me want something more. Made me remember there's light in the world. But the Yoon family has a successor waiting. Minjun's smile was grim. My cousin Jae-sung has been angling for the position for years. He can have it. I'm taking my son and the woman I love, and I'm walking away. The woman you love? Shannon's heart hammered. Did you think I'd give up my empire for just anyone? He kissed her softly. I love you, Shannon Jordan. I loved you when you offered to feed my son. Loved you when you stood in my world and refused to break. Love you now, standing here covered in glass and dust, still protecting my child. Tears streamed down Shannon's face. This is crazy. Probably. I've known you a week. Best week of my life. Your world almost got us killed. I'm leaving that world. For you. For Jang-woo. He kissed her again, deeper. Say you'll stay. Not for 2 days. Forever. Be my wife, Shannon. Not because of traditions or sacred bonds, but because I love you. And I hope, you might love me too. Shannon looked at this beautiful, dangerous, impossible man, thought about her week in his world, thought about how alive she'd felt in his arms, thought about Jang-woo sleeping peacefully against her chest. This child who'd healed something broken in her heart. I do love you, she whispered. God help me, I do. Then say yes. Yes. This is where love rewrites every rule. Subscribe and let's witness more transformations together. 6 months later, Shannon stood in a small church in Malibu, wearing a simple white dress. Jang-woo, now chubby and healthy, babbled happily in Mrs. Cho's arms in the front pew. Nervous? Minjun asked, looking devastating in a dark suit, his hand warm in hers. Terrified, Shannon admitted, but in a good way. The wedding was small, just Mrs. Cho, Tae Yang, and a handful of others who'd followed Minjun into his new life. Shannon's parents were there too, cautiously accepting of their daughter's whirlwind romance with the reformed businessman who'd swept her off her feet. They didn't know the whole truth. Didn't need to. That part of Minjun's life was over. The vows were simple. No mention of bosses or empires or sacred traditions. Just 2 people promising to love each other through whatever came next. When Minjun kissed her, Shannon felt complete for the first time since losing Zoe. This was her family now. Her impossible, beautiful, miraculous family. The reception was held at their new home, a beach house in Malibu, far from Los Angeles and the life Minjun had left behind. As they danced under string lights, Jang-woo sleeping peacefully inside, Shannon marveled at how much had changed. Any regrets? She asked against Minjun's chest. Not one. He pulled back to look at her. Though, I should warn you, Tae Yang got a call today. Shannon's stomach dropped. The family's found us. Minjun's jaw tightened. Nothing threatening, just checking in, making sure we're really out. And are we? We are. He kissed her forehead. I made my position clear. I'm done. The Yoon family belongs to Jae-sung now, and if anyone has a problem with that, they can take it up with the Council of Families, who, by the way, officially sanctioned my retirement. Because of me, Shannon understood, because I'm sacred to them. Because you saved the Yoon heir when no one else could. Because you proved that love is stronger than power. Minjun smiled. The old families respect that. They won't touch us. As if on cue, headlights appeared at the end of their driveway. Shannon tensed, but Minjun squeezed her hand reassuringly. A single car pulled up, and an older Korean man stepped out, well-dressed, carrying himself with authority. Don Choi. Minjun greeted him with careful respect. This is unexpected. Relax, Yoon. The older man smiled warmly. I come as a friend, not a threat. The families wanted someone to deliver this officially. He handed Minjun an envelope sealed with wax. Your retirement papers, signed by all 5 families. You're free, truly free. Minjun opened it, Shannon reading over his shoulder. It was a formal document releasing Minjun from all obligations to the Yoon family and the wider organization. Thank you, Minjun said quietly. Don't thank me. Thank your wife. Don Choi nodded to Shannon. What she did for your son? That kind of love? That kind of sacrifice? It reminded us all why we have these traditions. Why we protect women and children above all else. She earned your freedom, Yoon. Both of yours. He tipped his hat and left as quickly as he'd arrived. Shannon and Minjun stood in the driveway long after the taillights disappeared, the document still clutched in his hand. It's really over, Shannon whispered. It's really over. Minjun pulled her close. New life, new beginning. Just us and Jang Woo. And Jang Woo. He smiled. And maybe someday a little brother or sister for him. Shannon's hand went to her stomach where their secret was still too new to be visible. Maybe sooner than you think. Minjun's eyes widened. Are you 4 weeks along? I wanted to tell you after the wedding. She bit her lip nervously. Is that okay? His answer was to sweep her into his arms and spin her around, laughing with pure joy. When he set her down, both of them were crying happy tears. More than okay, Shannon. You've given me everything. A reason to live, a reason to love, a future worth having. You gave me that too. She kissed him softly. You and Jang Woo. You saved me when I thought I couldn't be saved. They stood in the California darkness, the ocean whispering beyond their home, with their past behind them and their future stretching ahead bright and full of possibility. Inside, Jang Woo let out a small cry. They broke apart with matching smiles, parents now, partners, lovers, friends. He's hungry, Shannon said. Then let's go feed our son. Minjun took her hand. Together. The way it should be. As they walked inside, Shannon looked back once at the driveway where the boss had delivered their freedom. At the dark ocean beyond that, held nothing more dangerous than waves. At the stars that witnessed their happy ending. She'd walked into a storm 6 months ago on that airplane. She'd found the most dangerous man in the Korean underworld and fed his child. And somehow, impossibly, miraculously, she'd found her home. Not in a place, but in a person. In a man who'd given up an empire for love. In a baby who'd needed her as much as she'd needed him. In a family built not on blood or tradition, but on choice. Shannon Jordan had finally found where she belonged, and she was never letting go.